Fire Emblem may also go by anime chess occasionally, but that doesn't mean every single move is some masterstroke Magnus Carlsen would be jealous of. Although you'd think he'd have tried giving some boots to his king by now. Anyway, fortunately for us players, we are not the only ones to occasionally slip up in our tactical master plans. Intelligent systems may have the experience of crafting chapter after chapter and map after map, but there's no denying that sometimes they just drop the ball. And I'm not even talking about story beats or chapter quality. I mean in terms of enemy placement, effectively their chess moves. Where are the enemies placed? What are they equipped with? It's something super important to our gameplay experience, but it's often overlooked as a discussion point. So how about we change that and look at some moments where IS crafted some red units that can only be described as dumb. A very simple example, just to give you a sense of what I mean. In the 14th chapter of the Binding Blade, we visit the desert known as Arcadia. Now, this chapter is already one of the worst in the entire series due to the way the chapter is designed, because it's a low movement desert map with Fog of War, yet it also requires you to beat it under a certain turn limit in order to get the true ending, and you need to baby one of the worst Fire Emblem units of all time to the end. But as disastrous as that setup is, it's not what I'm here to talk about. Because while the quality control department was on a break while creating this mess, a smaller, weird decision in terms of enemy design also slipped past. One of the enemy mercenaries in this chapter immediately starts charging you upon you coming within a 2-turn range of him, at which point you will feel the wrath of his Armor Slayer. You know, the weapon that hits super effective damage against armored units, as in the slowest units with the least amount of movement in the entire game. There is a pretty realistic chance that among every playthrough anyone has ever done of this game, this guy has never hit an armored unit. Think about it. First of all, I would wager many people would leave their armored units at home looking at the conditions of this map. We have to hurry up, the movement conditions are dire, and if you are gonna bring low movement units along, it's likely gonna be cavaliers, who are obviously hindered by the sand in this chapter. But even if you bring an armored unit along, this guy charges at you. He attacks the moment he has the chance, meaning that he will probably attack the units who are in the front of your caravan, which naturally starts to occur in a chapter like this. And I'm sure we can all agree a unit with the limited movement of an armored unit would likely not be in the front of such a caravan. If you're turtling, baiting enemies, then sure, maybe he would be, but since this chapter requires you to hurry, and the Fog of War prevents baiting because you can't tell what's coming, I don't think that is very likely. So yeah, now we have an enemy with an Armor Slayer, the boons of which he may have never even used. That's dumb, I would say. But at least this guy gets to use his weapon, just probably not its main benefit. That's more than another group of enemies I know can say. In the final chapter of the Blazing Blade, Light, and then its second part, your group of ragtag heroes face off against a fire dragon. It's not exactly the most iconic final boss in the series, but random as it feels to fight this giant beast 12-1, it also has something memorable to it. Except it isn't actually 12-1 at all. The Fire Dragon may appear to fight alone, but it's actually part of a team and can rely on the help of 2 druids, 2 sages and a bishop, all of which are armed to the teeth with long-ranged weaponry, like bolting, Venrir, perch and even 2 silence staves. There's only one problem. These magic users are positioned on pillars to the side of the map, so you can't get to them. And unless you deliberately go out of your way to back up from the Fire Dragon for some reason, they can't reach you whatsoever either, even with their long-range spells. As such, they are essentially set dressing, completely pointless enemies that literally serve no use whatsoever. Now, it has to be said that while their inclusion in the final game feels incredibly dumb, the reason why they're here is actually not deliberate in a sense. They're leftovers. In an early version of this chapter, you weren't supposed to start next to the Fire Dragon, but at the bottom of the stairs instead, meaning that making our way up to the top while dodging these mages was supposed to be part of the final chapter. This ended up changing, however, and the mages were just not removed, leaving them as completely pointless dangers that don't have to worry about running out of durability anytime soon. But hey, they have an excuse at least. That cannot be said for some other enemies seen throughout the series that are seemingly placed somewhere or have kits that can only be really explained as oversights. And while that may sound hard to believe, the fact these kinds of mistakes only seem to pop up at higher difficulties, not any base normal runs of the games, does make that feel more likely. A good example is New Mystery of the Emblem. In chapter 23, the Dark Pontifex Lives, there are 2 mage dragons added to the 2 rooms containing chests when playing on Lunatic, just to make it a little harder to retrieve them. Makes sense, right? Well, the only problem is that you cannot even reach these rooms when playing Lunatic, so these additions are completely pointless. In order to get these chests, you need to use Warp, and Warp is unobtainable in Lunatic New Mystery. It seems likely this is a simple oversight. It's not hard to imagine how it went down. Oh, we need to make this map more difficult, add more enemies, with the devs failing to realize that you can't even get the required item to make it here in the first place. Something similar happens in Abrupt Clash, which is the paralogue where you obtain Nina in Fire Emblem Fates. One of the knights in the Lunatic version of this map comes equipped with an Iron Axe if you play the map early, or a Steel Axe if you play the map later. The only problem is that knights cannot use axes in Fates, being that if you play this paralogue prior to chapter 18, this guy just flat out cannot hurt you whatsoever. He's walking, talking, not attacking, free EXP. After chapter 18, we find out how this mistake could have happened, as he is then promoted to General, which is a class that can use axes. It's likely this guy was created as a general, given an axe to attack with, and was then downgraded for when you played the chapter early, leading to an oversight with his now unusable weapon. Considering how many different enemy classes, setups and difficulties Fire Emblem has, I'm honestly a little surprised this hasn't happened more, at least as far as I could find. And finally, we cannot end this video without talking about one particular character. He may not be the most egregious example ever. Hell, you could say his flaws pale in comparison to some other enemies we've discussed in this video. But none of his fellow screw-ups have made such a name for themselves because of it as Gromell, boss of chapter 25 of Path of Radiance, called Strange Lands. As a character, Gromell really doesn't stand out. He's a pretty generic one-chapter boss who doesn't survive past his first appearance, so in that regard he should have been long forgotten. But instead, Gromell is in Heroes, and received a trading card in Fire Emblem Cypher too, and that is all the result of a sort of meme status he gained in the Fire Emblem community, particularly in Japan. And it's all due to his extremely odd unit design. Gromell is a Wyvern Lord, a class known for their impressive strength, so what weapon does he use? A Bold Axe, a weapon that relies on the user's magic stat rather than strength. Sounds like a recipe for disaster, but at least this was caught or deliberately designed this way because Gromell has a ridiculously high magic stat for a Wyvern Lord, a total of 12 points higher than it should be at this point. However, while his magic received an appropriate boost, his resistance actually did not, so while he deals impressive magic damage, he's very easy to take out with any magic user you might have. It isn't a bad thing if you're an early game boss to teach players to search for weaknesses, but remember, Gromell is the boss of chapter 25. We're way past the point of leaving such glaring weaknesses, I would say. But this is not even where it ends. Like most bosses in Path of Radiance, Gromell has a skill, and his one is actually one of the best in the entire game, Resolve, which grants him immense boosts in both speed and strength. As in, the stat he doesn't use because of his Bold Axe. His entire kit is a mismatch of bizarre proportions, the likes of which you may find in the playthrough of a first-timer going through Awakening of Three Houses, but not a boss designed by IS themselves. And as the chuckle cherry on top of the hilarious cake, there is the fact that Gromell will charge at you when you enter his range. While this would normally prove quite a challenge, I mean, charging bosses can be outright nightmares, in his case it leads to another funny scenario. One of the main hazards or gimmicks of this chapter is the boulders thrown down by the enemies that do 10 damage whenever they hit. And of course, rocks don't discriminate. If they hit an enemy, they also do damage. And if they hit Gromell, well, he too can become a victim of his own master plan. It's a perfect blend of bizarreness that resulted in one of the strangest one-chapter bosses the series has ever seen. And while his status as a fan favorite and meme is definitely waning, if it hasn't waned completely, the fact his design as a unit was so crazy and dumb, it once landed him this status, means I cannot end this video without mentioning it. I mean, did you even know about Gromell? And are there any dumb enemies I forgot? Share it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribing. And if you really want to support me, you can now become a channel member to get all kinds of fun perks and help me keep bringing these videos to your doorstep every week. For now, thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.